Health and Human Services Agency. Just really excited to be here with you all today, especially in this space. So we're right now at the Child Welfare Digital Services building, which is literally the embodiment of the new approach to our procurement. And which is a result of a lot of the innovation efforts that we've been doing. We have about 2/3 of the departments now doing innovation efforts, and OSHPD is one of those. And so I'm going to get my geek on a little bit here and talk a little bit about why I'm so excited about this particular project. The geo mapping and the data matching are just incredible in this project, and I think are two things that we really underutilize in this agency and really in state government in general. And it's just so impactful. It really, when you geomap something, you can see what's going on. People that don't understand the technology, don't understand all the analytics and everything, can immediately see what it is that you're talking about, look at it and say, okay, well, I understand how the overlap is or where the density looks like it's the best here and it's weaker here. Much easier than if you give them a chart or something that's just numerical that they have to process through and try to figure out what's going on. An example of this during the fires that we did, we geomapped all of the facilities that this agency licenses or certifies. So healthcare services, public health, social services, we took all of their facilities, geomapped them to look at where they were in relation to the fires, figure out which ones were in the areas that were being impacted, what the bed counts looked like outside of those areas, so that if we needed to start finding beds for folks, we could figure out what the capacity looked like outside. And then when we were trying to figure out, ultimately towards the end of the initial event, what had happened to the facilities, we were calling them, trying to figure it out, and we had these large counts of facilities that we couldn't figure out what had happened to them. And it's when we took the area that the CAL FIRE had put together and overlaid our facilities with it, that we could see, well, some of those facilities are in the destroyed area. You know, they aren't going to be answering the phone. But we didn't have to then send people out. We were able to do that just looking at geomapping. Saved us a lot of time. Ultimately, we did that in the second week of the event. Ultimately, that's something we should be doing. We should have ready to go as soon as the event happens. So, populated before the event so that we can use it as a decision-making tool, and we can actually be ready to go and help people in those sorts of events. So that's why this sort of project I'm just so excited about, and all the work that you've done. And I know it's not easy work, and a lot of the difficulty is behind the scenes, and so people never see it. They just look at a map and they go, wow, that's cool, and not realizing all of the work that goes into that, and along with the data matching, which is something that we're working on across the agency, trying to do a better job of matching up our disparate data sets so that we can better understand how our projects are working, how our programs impact people, and how we can be more efficient and effective. So just really happy to be here in this particular space and with you all. And with that, I'll turn it over to Fran.
Hi there, everyone. I'm happy to be here today. I'm Fran Muller. I'm the Chief Deputy Director for OSHPD. As Mike talked a little bit about kind of, what the focus of the use case teams and the innovation efforts are, and it's really about improving services, increasing organizational efficiencies, delivering products and services that are helpful and responsive to the needs of Californians. Not just meeting their immediate needs, but how do we make it easy for them? How do we get them directly what they need? How do we do it in a way that is more simple for them? So, the whole government process isn't quite as complicated. So innovation is really about making things easier and more valuable to the consumer and the end user. So at OSHPD, we've really embraced those same goals and values of the innovation use case teams. We encourage our staff to really draw on those principles and look for new and creative ways to improve our processes. How do we do work? How do we make it better and easier? Not just for the folks we're delivering services to, but also for the folks that are doing the work. How do we innovate new ways of using and displaying data? And how do we better support our department's mission, OSHPD's mission? OSHPD's mission is to advance safe, quality healthcare environments through innovative and responsive services as information. And you will notice we have the word innovative in our mission statement. So to focus on that goal of innovation, we've recently merged our IT operations with our data analytics programs to better support the delivery of those integrated services. This really critical organizational change is going to help streamline our program operations, how we do business, and better serve our clients and our stakeholders. And some of those stakeholders are our own sister departments within Health and Human Services Agency. So we were really excited when we had an opportunity to participate in the second cohort of use case teams, especially when the focus really is about innovating and using data differently, because data is really right up our alley at OSHPD. So when the team came together and they really started to think about ideas of what would be a good project to do, they were really encouraged to think big, to think creatively. They listened to all the different ideas, they encouraged creativity, they created excitement amongst themselves, they challenged each other. They were determined to come together and basically say, we're going to operate outside of conventional boundaries, we're going to do things differently. And they started with, why not? Okay, why can't we do certain things? Why not? So they landed on, why not propose a project that could potentially change the way OSHPD and its programs measure success and deliver critical services. Why not? And that's just what they did. So this use case team is part of our Healthcare Workforce Development Division. This division is responsible for strengthening and increasing a culturally competent healthcare workforce that provides care to Californians in medically underserved areas throughout the state. So through this use case team, they had an opportunity to conduct a study and develop an innovative solution to better understand the healthcare workforce throughout the state and healthcare issues facing those communities in need. The team combined staff from different programs and different knowledge bases. These talented and very enthusiastic folks, they came together in a short amount of time, and they were very quickly sprinting towards a common goal. So while we hope this project will ultimately be successful and result in better services for Californians, it's already been a win at OSHPD. One of the goals of these teams is to encourage our employees to look at their work and programs through a new lens, a lens of innovation, new approaches, and improved services. And they've done just that. This project has created kind of a movement within our department and excitement, and marks a cultural shift from turning raw data to real information, and from operating kind of as part of the status quo to improved outcomes for Californians. So with that, I would like to introduce our project lead, Hovig Khosrovian. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran. Thank you everyone for joining us today. So we're going to talk about our use case and some of the tools we used to continue with the use case study and some of the findings we had today. So our use case, as you can see, it's called the Primary Care Health Workforce. That was, as Fran mentioned, really our focus. The innovation use case team kind of came around at the perfect time, I kind of feel, for us, because what it did is we had these certain data issues we were facing. We had certain requirements at the federal level as well as programmatically for our data. The focus of our division, the Healthcare Workforce Development Division, is really to identify areas of need and help those areas of need draw down federal funds as well as make them more eligible for receiving state funding, ultimately to increase access to care. That's really what our primary focus is. With that, we had some data issues, which was what the use case kind of came at, like as I said, at the perfect time. One of the things we had is multiple data sets, and they didn't necessarily always work together. They didn't match up. They weren't perfect together. So we weren't able to really continue what we needed to do in our programs for understanding these underserved communities. Second was the amount of time it took to look at these data sets. It was very time consuming. Just an example, one of our programs is a federally funded program that looks at these shortage areas, and we had literally had to call providers and find out if they're actually there. And that was one of the things that was kind of blew my mind, is why are we contacting them when they have all these multiple data sets? Can't we all bring it together and really understand where they are without consuming so much time as to contact them? And that's kind of where this use case fits in with a lot of other departments that probably have similar issues with their data sets, where you have multiple disparate data sets, that potentially could work together, but why aren't they? What can we do? How can we innovate to make it work? And lastly, one of the things we've heard a lot from our stakeholders and our constituents at the local level was, well, you're telling us these areas are underserved, but you're not really capturing the information in our communities. Our communities need the help too, need the funding. Why can't we access it? And that's a question we've always had within our division. Why are we still seeing issues within these communities when the data says otherwise? So really what we're looking for, and the objective is ultimately for this use case, was one, improving our targeting and prioritization, so we could really understand where the providers are, what the data is telling us. We can really target better and get the programs to be more effective in those areas. Second is we can make better decision making on our programs, whether it's due to funding, due to identifying access issues. We can really understand what's going on and how to tackle those serious issues. And lastly, we could show how effective our programs are by using this data that we could potentially combine and analyze. We can tell the constituents, we could tell the legislature, we could tell our department executives, all the way up through our partner agencies as well. We can let them know what is going on at this level, how do we identify what the issues are, and how do we help those constituents. With that, I am going to pass it along to Stacy Walker, who's our deputy director, who's going to speak with Ross Lellian and Evan Wallace about some of the tools we use and how we understood the data.
So good afternoon. Our use case, as Hovik said, necessitated getting as much data as we could about healthcare access and outcomes so that we could determine how our targeting and processes were stacking up. I think that's something everyone can relate to, process improvement, and hopefully getting your programs to the people who need them, the resources to the people who need them most. Anytime you merge data sets, especially large data sets, from multiple sources, it creates a lot of challenges. The condition of the data is generally a challenge, data quality. Data may be formatted inconsistently. There may be issues with the table structures not being consistent. We used kind of two different things, the visualization of that data to help mitigate some of these issues, as well as some tools to help us improve the quality of the data. So Evan and Ross are going to share a little bit about what they did, and I always say begin with the end in mind. So let's start with big picture first, and I mean an actual picture. So Evan, what are we looking at here? Can you walk us through this picture?
Yeah, so this is a map of Stanislaus County, kind of in central California, and these are the 9 communities that we as a division study. And so we've shaded each one according to a variable to create this chloropleth map that lets you see the variability within a region. So in our case, we've mapped a health indicator, so where the darkest areas are generally the worst health areas. But it's useful for any rate or ratio. You can do like a percent poverty or a population density would work just as well for this.
So what kind of tools did you use to create this map?
There's a little work under the hood with Excel and SAS to kind of prep the data and get it in the right format. But then we actually used ArcGIS to make the chloropleth map. There's a couple of ways to do it. I know you can do it in Tableau, but ArcGIS was the most robust one for our purposes.
So I understand you were new to using ArcGIS.
Yeah, I was brand new to it, but I'm a millennial, so I Googled it, and then I found some data online. I started playing with it, and then consulting with a few more experienced GIS people, Chris in the audience, and kind of get some guidance, and they offer what GIS can do and some technical help as to how to do it. It's just kind of nice to just talk to people and learn that way.
So there's a lot of internal and external resources to help with ArcGIS.
Yeah, our IT department's been really supportive, and then there's a lot of stuff. Esri has some official users groups, and there's some training like here in Sacramento I hope to go to next month. So there's a lot of resources out there to help you learn how to do this sort of thing.
There's no reason to be intimidated.
Yeah, go for it, yeah.
So let's take a look at the next map. So it looks like the same area. Can you kind of explain what's going on with the picture there?
Yeah, so one of my favorite things about GIS is the ability to layer data on top of other data. It kind of reminded me of Photoshop if you've ever used that. You can kind of add a new layer and play with transparency so you can see both the layers. So what we've done here in GIS is we took that the map you saw earlier about the health indicators, and we've layered another data on top that's basically eligibility for our program. It's a simplification of it, but one of the things we do in the division, like Hovik said, was we incentivize providers to work in certain areas. So you can think of this as we can incentivize providers to work in the areas with the diagonal white stripes. And so you can do this kind of visual gap analysis. So if you think of the blue part of the map as the areas with the most need, but in our program reach is the layer on top, you can kind of see, oh, maybe we're not reaching this area that has need.
So that dark blue area in the middle would probably have the worst healthcare outcomes, but they're still not identified as a shortage area.
Right, so if more providers could help them with their health outcomes, we can't currently, or we might not be able to incentivize people to work there, so.
Okay, great. So how might you see this be used for another program?
That kind of gap analysis could really apply to any program, or just the ability to layer data and to kind of try to see two data sets together. If that doesn't work, you swap one out and put another one in, and you kind of build relationships that way. It's a really useful tool to kind of analyze different data.
I like your Photoshop analogy, but for the over 40 crowd, it's almost like the overhead transparencies they used to use. So let's take a look at the next map. So that's pretty colorful. You want to walk us through that?
Yeah, so this comes from a data set that basically tells you where people go to the hospital. So you have an origin, and you have a destination and a frequency, or a number of visits in this case. So anytime you have this data that has an origin and a destination, a cool thing you can do in GIS is you can plot the origin, you can plot the destination, then draw a line between the two things. And that kind of gives you an idea of the distance you have to travel to see that one, or to go there. Then you can do other things like color the line a certain color based on a category, whether you expected them to do that or not, or how long that line is. And so you can really use it to analyze transport or motion. Yeah.
Or access.
Or access, yes, our case,
So
yeah.
let me see if I understand. The red areas, those red lines, are areas where they had to travel outside their service area to get health care. And the blue show where they were able to get health care within their service area.
Exactly. And there's, as you can tell, there's a lot more red than there is blue. So people in this county have to travel a lot for health services. I think one of the take-home points here is that this data set's something like 100,000 records, and you just heard that it exists, and you kind of already understand the basic idea of it, the trends in the data set. It's like they all converge in the same place. There's a lot more red than there is blue. Some people have to leave their county. And so it's a really efficient way of summarizing a data set and getting someone to understand it so you can start actually dealing with what it says.
So getting back to what Fran said about accessing services, any program that wanted to provide some kind of an access, they could go ahead and create a map like this to see how long people were needing to travel to get services in any type of an area.
Yeah, so you can really quantify that travel burden.
Okay. I have a feeling it's really interesting to see how a picture can convey so much. I've had the pleasure of both being a researcher and supervising researchers for many years, and we always struggle with that issue of data quality. Can't tell you how many times my staff's come to me and said, we can't use this data set, the data quality is really, really poor. So I start asking the questions and breaking it down, and sure, there's issues with the data, but in comparison to the decisions you want to make, perhaps it's fine. And I think with these maps, it's just really, really clear. Everything's in relativities. So it makes the overall quality of the data less important, but as researchers, we're always striving to kind of improve that data quality. So it becomes really, really clear with these examples what the message is. So you want to go to the next slide? So we're comparing the two maps side by side now. So Evan, you want to talk a little bit about how someone might be able to use the blue map for targeting and the more red map for access?
Yeah, so the visual gap analysis on the left map, you can see maybe we need to adjust the way we target our resources to these areas that we're missing. And maybe the reason we're missing these areas is because of stuff like there's a lack of access in hospital care, for example. So you can kind of combine the two and come to some conclusions and make some new research projects.
So that's kind of really good to inform the policy discussion.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, great. So why don't we go ahead and go to the next slide. Ross, you want to share with us a little bit about what we did to assemble the multiple data sets?
Yeah, sure. So we work with several different types of data sets in the project. So a couple examples are demographic data sets or hospital data sets. And kind of a common challenge that arises when you merge different data sets is that they're grouped differently, and I'll give you an example of what I mean. So most of our research are based on medical service study areas, and this is specialized geography. We refer to them as MSSAs. And just to give you guys some context of what MSSA is, it's a rational service area, and it's used for the purpose of identifying areas of need in terms of primary care providers. They're made up of at least one census tract. And so when you're working with specialized geographies, whether it's legislative districts or counties, or in our case, MSSAs, a common issue is that the boundaries don't align, so it's hard to group them. And this is really common with zip code level data, and zip code level data is valuable because everyone's kind of familiar with them. They're kind of a common language for data sets, but they're just postal routes, right? So they could overlap any type of specialized geography, again, whether it's a district, in our case, MSSAs. And that's what this slide here kind of shows. It's a map of Stanislaus County, and it shows overlap between zip codes and MSSAs and the possible issue when you try to merge different data sets together.
Yeah, I have a feeling a lot of people have challenges like this. I can think of two times in my career distinctly where we had this issue. One was zip codes overlapping county lines. So I think that's a real common challenge for folks. So Ross, how did you go about addressing that challenge?
Yeah, I definitely agree it's a common challenge because we all work in different geographies for our respective business needs. And there's external data sets that are extremely useful, but they're just grouped differently. So a relatively archaic solution is using a crosswalk file. And crosswalk files are useful because they allow us to join or merge different data sets that are grouped differently, and that enriches our data sets and make them more informative. So in the slide here, we have an example of a piece of a crosswalk file. And this is from the Department of Housing, and they maintain a crosswalk file that's updated quarterly. And that's important because it's responsive to changes in zip code configuration. So in this example here, we start with the zip code level population, and then we break it down into a granular level, in this case, census tract. And when we have it at the census tract level, we could group it at the MSSA level, and all of a sudden it becomes extremely useful for us. And for us, the MSSA is kind of our business need, but in theory, you could do this for any type of specialized geography, whatever fits your business need. So once we have this data at the MSSA level, all of a sudden that zip code level population becomes MSSA level population, and we could utilize it for our research. So it's an example of how you could use a crosswalk file to make your data extremely informative.
So basically what you're doing is you're estimating the amount of census tract data that you're going to assign based on the population and the zip code.
Yeah, exactly, yes. You break it down to the census tract level, then you're gonna roll it up or aggregate it to the MSSA level, and then all of a sudden goes from data to extremely useful information, so.
And then when you put in a picture, that
Exactly, then
estimate
that's where
is
Evan's
much
work
more
comes into play.
powerful.
Exactly, yeah. Then you can target your resources and you can find out areas of unmet need and things of that nature. Go to the next slide. Cool, thanks. So this is another example of how one may utilize a crosswalk file. So in this example, we store one row of data in 3 variables. So we have patient level zip code, hospital zip code, and the number of discharges within a hospital zip based on patient zip code. So with 2 relatively easy steps, we're going to take that row of data and make it extremely useful information for us. So the first step is to take the hospital zip code level and break that down into the census tract level to make it more granular. And our next step is to do that also with patient zip code to break that down to at the census tract level. And once our data is aggregated at the census tract level, as it is under crosswalk 2 there on the slide, then we could again roll it up to MSSA level. And at the end, so at the end, we're informed about where folks go for care based on MSSA, and we could be informed about patient migration patterns and things like that. So it's another example of starting off this one row of data, then utilizing the crosswalk file to turn that data into useful information.
So this seems like it could be a rather tedious task. Are there any tools out there to help you move through this process?
Yeah, absolutely. What's nice about this analysis is somebody could theoretically use Microsoft Excel for this analysis, depending on the size of your data set. You don't have to have a fancy data tool for it. Our data sets are pretty large, so we use SAS Enterprise Guide.
So do you have internal and external support to help guide you through the process?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing about SAS Enterprise Guide, which is nice, is point and click. So
it's
there's
all GUI interface.
Yeah, exactly. There's no coding or programming involved, and you still get that same power as you do with the coding version of SAS. And there's a plethora of resources. So SAS does great training, and if there's enough interest within a department to actually come on campus and conduct the training, or there's external training sites here in Sacramento, which makes it pretty convenient. There's a lot of resources online. So if you go on Google in the school, whatever issue you're facing, there's a bunch of resources. There's SAS support, and there's SAS blogs and things like that. Then also we have SAS user groups. So OSHPOD hosts a user group for Health and Human Services. And if anyone's interested, my contact information's on the slide here. If you want to come join our user group and see what it's about, we usually meet about once a month. And there's also a state user group which I could provide information on that meets periodically.
Wow, there sounds like there's a lot of support.
Yeah,
for
there
that
is.
out
It's
there.
really nice.
So, Evan, I understand that you had challenges across the data sets. Can you tell us a little bit about how many data sets you merged and what kind of challenges you undertook? I know as researchers, we're always looking for that single source of truth, but sometimes it's really difficult to get to.
Yeah, so as Hovik was talking about earlier, we talked to other departments in agency, managed care, healthcare services, and we started sharing address data for providers. So I think we ended up with 4 different sources of addresses, and it was kind of an ordeal to get them to all link together because they're all different. And not only do they have different addresses, but they also follow different standards, like on how they use punctuation or what abbreviations they use, which makes it hard to match them up. So we just wanted to share a few kind of general tips, things we learned from the process. First of all, if you're just trying to merge things together, stop and see if someone already made a master file, some forward-thinking person did this work for you already. Like say, the way public health identifies a facility and the way OSHPD identifies it. And if you're really lucky, they put it on Open Data Portal already, and it's just waiting for you to go get it. If that's not available, you can try to make your own identifiers based on the data that you have. In our group, we had some success with making an identifier out of the street number and the zip code. It depends on your data set, though. And you can recode your values to follow some conventions. And if that doesn't work, there's these things called fuzzy matching functions. They do things like phonetic coding, which will basically take a word, and based on how it sounds, it'll make a numeric code for it, basically. And so that'll do something like Matthew Damon and Matt Damon will look like the same thing with phonetic coding. And then you can measure dissimilarity. That does things like, 2 things are different, but that'll tell you exactly how different they are. And it does things like how many changes you have to make from A to make it exactly like B. Then you can threshold what's acceptable based on your data. And so it's not meant to be a tutorial, but meant to say that there's things out there that you can look up, and it'll help you fit that square peg in the round hole and kind of get to a reasonable degree of certainty with your data when you're matching these data that don't really match.
So what kind of tools helped you do this?
This was mostly in SAS. Some of this stuff's available in Excel, just kind of it's a function. But SAS was really helpful, and our data sets are pretty big, like Ross was saying, and so SAS is a great way to bulk process.
So it sounds like you have a lot of experience both now at the end of this use case in ArcGIS as well as SAS.
Yeah.
Can you share with us a little bit what the learning curve was like for using ArcGIS?
Yeah, it's point and click. It is kind of intimidating. Because it does a lot, but there's a few things in there that are relatively easy to do, especially if you have someone kind of mentoring you a certain way. And it's probably a little harder than Excel, but a little persistence, you can get there. It's doable. Yeah.
Okay, great. I think it's pretty clear that we made a lot of effort to get the data quality to a pretty high level. But then when you take a look at it and overlay it into a picture, that relativity is really the message rather than the specific data quality itself. So it's really powerful when you marry those GIS and SAS tools and bring that visualization to life. It really helps with the processes and whatnot. So I also understand that we had the census data that we used, the survey census data, and I understand you matched the two up. What did you find when you compared those two data sets?
Yeah, that was kind of a cool exercise because we had the data that Hovig's team had actually called and said, okay, where you actually work? And so we took that and compared it to the other data sets we had and say, oh, is there another way we can kind of know ahead of time where they are? And so we matched address to address in a couple of different ways. One was exact street address to exact street address. And then we also took kind of a broader perspective, and it's, instead of where are you on the street, it's are you in this MSSA, yes or no? And that was a really interesting, like focus on narrowing the question and what do we really need to know. And I think when we were doing the address matches, we were getting matches of something like 75% on some of the data sets, whereas when we had the more broad perspective of are you in this MSSA, in some cases we had like a 98% match, so we could be pretty confident of where the provider was with that.
So for the particular question we were asking, the data quality was really good. I think
Yeah.
anyone would, agree that 98% data quality is really good. Yeah, so that's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
So, thank you both. It's really nice. We've got a new data set that will help us improve our processes and hopefully help inform the policy discussion about improving the way that we target our program. So it's a win-win. Hovig, you want to wrap things up?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Stacy. So today we heard a lot about the tools we use, the data, how we collected it, how we put it together to really benefit our office, our division, and our department. But really, this kind of goes broadly into all aspects of all departments. Everyone uses data in the state, whether it's to drive policy and drive decision making, or to inform you of what's going on in the community so you can assist them. With us, really one of our main focuses and what really is our lessons learned and outcomes for our business need was that perfect data is not contingent on quality data, and vice versa. Quality data is not contingent on perfect data. It doesn't have to be perfect to be good. And that's one of the things we learned, is that if you look at, depends on the perspective you're looking at. In this case, we use visualization and geographic information system mapping to really see the big picture. When Evan mentioned where we zoomed out and all of a sudden we go, aha, there it is. This is what we've been looking for. That's when we really realized this is the data we have. The data we have now is we're able to use it to really move forward in our program. So again, one of the things we really want to stress is the tools are there. You don't need perfect data to move forward. You can move forward with the data you have and the tools available to you to have your programs incrementally improve. Or in this case, for us, really have that aha moment and really are able to move on past your requirements to do more than you thought you could. Second, it really improves our processes. So one of the things we learned when we had this data set was that we no longer have to go and one by one call these doctors anymore for our case. But it's really expands to the rest of the departments as well when you're looking at these data and matching them up, is that it really can save you a significant amount of time. We went from literally calling them one by one to all of a sudden just pulling up a spreadsheet and being like, there's the results, we're done. Move on to the next case, move on to the next issue. And really what it did was help us target as well. So one of the maps that Evan showed where we saw that it had little gaps in there from the blue. What we could see there is that we're not addressing those areas in need. Excuse me. So what we were able to do is really see what's going on in those communities. Why are those communities having such access to care issues? And that can really expand to all the other programs within our department, as well as just other departments that use similar data sets and similar geographies. You can really see what's going on at that level and target your programs to potentially areas that you never knew needed help, or constituents that you didn't realize really needed the help that your programs provide. And lastly, we can really measure the outcomes when you use these data sets and tools. You can look at potentially impacting policy when you realize that you're really missing out on an area that really does need the help. How can we adjust policy? How can we make moves within our programs to really impact that community. Secondly, we can really measure how well our programs are doing outside of just making policy changes. We can look at the data set and be like, well, look, year to year, we really impacted them this much. Is that the best we could do, or can we do more? And lastly, we can share these findings with the community. So in our case, we're able to share it with those local communities and say, we do understand what you're saying, and now we have the data behind it to really paint a better picture of what's going on. Let's work together. Let's work with our partners, with our stakeholders, as well as other departments that we can, to really address what's going on there. So really, that was our focus for this use case, and I think we've been successful in collecting that data, really getting us to where we wanted to be, and it's really opened up a whole new plethora of options for us to look at what else we can do program-wise, division-wise, and potentially departmental-wise. So with that, here's our contact information. If anyone does have any questions, I know those of you online, you can always email us questions they might have. But next we're going to go and see if anyone in the audience today in-house has some questions as well. So, are there any questions? No one? Don't be shy. No one? I'll pose a question to Evan.
Okay.
Put him on the spot. So, looking at the maps, how simple was it to really? I know you said it was pretty easy to combine the 3 data sets together and then to map them out. But what does that entail? Does that entail like, hours of work, or is it literally just ask a few people and point and click and you're done?
Up front, it was hours of work to figure it out, but eventually you get a SAS program that you just point at a different data source and it'll run the program for you. So it took a little effort up front and talking to a few people on how to do it, kind of refining what exactly we wanted out of it. But it takes some thought up front, but it's reusable and modular, so that you can apply it to a lot of different situations once you've done it.
And I'll speak from experience too, just on looking at all these data sets, because we do it a lot with our program, and looking at it on a geographic mapping tool. You look at enough table rows, your eyes start getting blurry, it starts getting watery, and you have no idea what it's saying. You put it on a map and you're like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
That's it. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
So it's really it's an amazing tool, GIS, is to really get you to understand what your program is doing and how it's impacting people. That's our ultimate goal here. Was what more can we do for the people of the state, and how can we move forward with our programs to really help them? That's kind of my perspective when we're looking at data versus like tables versus mapping. It's amazing how it just changes your view. Any other questions? Oh, sure. Go ahead.
So as you look at these maps and things change over time, how often do you plan on updating it, and are you going to compare the current map to the last quarter's map? That sort of, how are you going to use the data in the future?
I think with the use case, we started off with 3 regions in the state of California, kind of focusing in on just some regions. California is really, really diverse, and so usually what you find is a little bit different everywhere. Now we're conducting analysis on the entire state to see if the outcomes that we found in those smaller geographic areas hold true for the rest of the state. So then we'll be able to take that to some of the decision makers on these programs and say, hey, do we want to change the way that we target our programs? So that's kind of the next steps.
Great. Anyone else? Any other questions? So I guess with that, I mean, do we have anyone have any more to add, or just
No.
no advice?
Yeah.
It's interesting. We had the data forum a while back, and I presented at a very high level. We had some questions, and one of the questions was, how do you get folks excited about this? And it was interesting working with this team. They were so excited and so interested and so engaged, and it was a lot of fun. So, if you have an opportunity to do a use case, I really encourage you all to do it. It's an incredible exercise at bringing together minds in a room to really dig deep into the data and tear apart an issue and really look at things through a new lens, and it's a lot of fun. Don't look at it as work, it's fun. We really had a good time. I think I can speak for the whole team.
Yeah, it was in the, and it's what, and this is, I also want to take the opportunity to really thank department leadership and agency leadership for really bringing this out, like having this innovation use case team, because just personally, it's kind of always been a pipe dream of mine to really get this data set together, just because I've been in this program for so many years and always had these challenges, and to be able to all of a sudden have it, it's like, oh, thank you so much, because this saves so much time, and it's going to enable us to do so much more with the program than just this manual process. It's really got to enable us to really do what we intend on. A lot of us do public service is really to help the people of the state, and it's really going to enable us to do that rather than just mining over data sets and just reading them. It's really going to let us go on to the next step. So I just wanted to tell you how appreciative we are of that. So yeah, thank you. So I think that's a wrap for this. For this. So thanks everyone for joining us. Appreciate it. And please, any questions? Our contact information is here, and I believe it'll be the slide set or the contact will be forwarded out later as well. So thanks a lot.